Hi, everybody. My name's Laura Landon. I'm with Hennebery Eddy Architects. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. We're looking forward to sharing a couple of our award-winning projects with you. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself? And then I'll go ahead and get started with the co-op.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Smith. I'm a principal here with Hennebery Eddy, and we'll be covering the back half of this presentation with our Oregon Supreme Court project.
Great. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Right. So I'll be presenting a project in Bozeman, Montana, the Community Food Co-op Edition, which was completed in 2018. So a little background. Bozeman is located in the southwest part of Montana. It's in the Gallatin Valley, which is an intermountain area surrounded by 3 mountain ranges. There are 3 big rivers coming out of those mountain ranges that's come together in the valley to form the Missouri River. So there's skiing, there is fly fishing. It's a community very connected to the outdoors and really a great place to live. And for that reason, we've seen a lot of growth recently. Our client, the Community Food Co-op, has grown along with Bozeman. The co-op was established in 1979 when Bozeman was really just a small town. About 21,000 folks lived there. The town continued to grow, and so did the co-op. In 2002, our firm did a major addition to the co-op's building on Main Street, a primary thoroughfare through Bozeman. This addition and the co-op are sort of a iconic place in Bozeman. The Bozeman really loves the co-op. They get their groceries there. They treat it like their living room, and it's a gathering place for the community. Our populations continue to grow. We're at almost 60,000 people now, and Bozeman's starting to feel like a small city. And the co-op has grown right along with the city and continues to remain very relevant. We started working with the co-op in 2015. They came to us because they had acquired a property adjacent to their existing building. They had also outgrown this existing building. They were using off-site commercial kitchen, off-site administrative spaces, and were considering moving all their functions to this site and kind of preparing for growth in the next 10 years. But they weren't sure that was what they wanted to do. So we spent about 2 years looking at programming. What did the co-op need? What would structure that housed all their functions look like? What other alternatives were there? So in those 2 years, we really got to know our client well. We got to know them as individuals, and we really learned about their values. The co-op values sustainability. They value the community. They value authenticity in food production, and they wanted their project, whatever it ended up being, to really reflect those values. So in 2017, the co-op decided to move forward with a large addition. We started the design process by developing a number of options that illustrated big design concepts of what this building could be. These are 2 of the concepts that we looked at. The first one was called Farm Farm. And the idea with this concept was that we would repeat the agricultural forms and materials that you see in the 2002 building. Our other option we called New Neighbor, and the idea with this option was that the building would differ significantly from the existing structure in form and material and be a new neighbor to the existing building, allowing that kind of iconic building to remain and stand alone. So this is the aerial view of the whole property. You can see the original co-op building, which was actually a gas station to start with here, 2002 addition, located here. Can everybody see my cursor? Thank you, Andrew. The new addition is to the west of the existing building. Parking is to the south, Main Street is to the north, and there's a service area here which provides a space for pickup and delivery, garbage, recycling, and composting. First floor plan. The majority of the first floor is a large production commercial kitchen. The co-op produces a lot of food here that they sell in their store that's past the break line here and at a satellite location. There's a warehousing area here and shipping and receiving here. A small portion of the addition right here is the retail, a retail component. All of the existing building remained retail. The second floor is primarily an office space. This area is open to the warehousing space below and then mechanical room at the south side of the building. So, as I said before, the co-op promotes sustainability. This building doesn't have a third-party certification, but it was designed with sustainability always primary focus. The building is oriented so that the long face of the building faces south, something we try to do with all our buildings to take advantage of solar energy or passive design strategies. You can see also in this image the solar array that is mounted to the surface of this mechanical penthouse. This is a cogeneration unit which provides power and heat to the building. There are several skylights that bring light into the middle of what is a fairly large floor plate, and then the sedum roof. We took what we refer to as a core and shell process to this, to the design of this building. We had recently completed a renovation of a 4-story timber frame building, which was in really terrible shape. It hadn't been used in about 50 years, but was renovated because it had a absolutely beautiful structure. And so we really focused on making the structure, the core of this building, as well as the envelope, very flexible and very beautiful, with the hope that in 75 years, 50 years, maybe this building doesn't want to be a grocery store anymore. We wanted to create a core that could potentially be reused, and that would be reused because it has some inherent qualities that people like. So the co-op values authenticity in their food production. They value community wellness, and they're a very inclusive organization. They want everybody to feel welcome in this building. In fact, a lot of their signage says "everyone welcome" on the graphics. So we really wanted to embody those values in this building. A easy choice for embodying those values was the use of wood as a primary material. The co-op has a timber frame structure, which you can see here exposed in the commercial kitchen. It also utilizes daylight as much as possible. Again, the timber frame structure visible in the warehousing area. And also, this is another view of the commercial kitchen, and you can see some of the timber, the mass timber visible here. There are large windows all along the north side of this kitchen, which face towards Main Street. I have never seen a commercial kitchen that is that has so much daylight and is so visible to the public. You can drive by here and see your bread being baked. Again, the mass timber structure and daylight being used in this small new retail area. Together, these materials, the daylight, plus the really great food, make this a very inviting space. We also used wood on the exterior of the building in several forms. The upper portion of the building has an acetylated wood rain screen. This is basically a pickled wood product that was selected for its low maintenance and durability. On the lower portion of the building, we used rough sawn stacked on the flat 2x4s, which is reminiscent of the granary construction that you see in historic farm sites in the Gallatin Valley. There's also some of the mass timber structure visible on the exterior of the building. And again, this is Main Street, and these are those windows that look directly into the commercial kitchen. This is a view of the building across Main Street. Again, you can see the cogeneration unit here. Windows looking into the commercial kitchen. On the flat wood siding, acetylated wood siding. And it's hard to see, but there's a log bench right here, which is kind of the rawest use of wood that we could imagine. Basically a log with the top cut off that provides a small seating area. This view shows the green roof, which benefits the building. We were able to eliminate any new stormwater retention facilities required by the city by using this green roof. But it also really benefits the community. You know, it helps with heat island effect, and it is a very attractive, I think, element to the building, which reflects the building's the co-op's values. And I'll end with a few images from the interior office space. You can see that this building has very limited finishes. There's all of the floors are, or almost all the floors are polished concrete, simple gypboard partitions. We did reuse some of the original siding, which was salvaged before that for the 2002 project, as an interior finish. But besides that, the mass timber structure and daylight are the primary features on the interior. And together, those two elements really make this a lovely space to be in. And we've heard only good things from co-op employees working in this building. All right, and that's what I have to share today. Andrew, I'll hand the presentation over to you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. You want to stop sharing your screen? I can share mine. Okay. Are you able to see my slides? Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I was supposed to be joined today by my colleague Josette Ketcha, who was heavily involved throughout the course of the Supreme Court project, but unfortunately she is in a remote place right now and has little to no internet connection. So I am going to be doing both of our parts. So please forgive me if it doesn't seem quite polished through the portion that Josette was going to do. But we had the pleasure of doing a substantial rehabilitation of the Oregon Supreme Court building over the past, 5 to 6 years or so. And the primary impetus of the project, if I can get my cursor, the primary impetus of the project was the seismic vulnerability of the building. So I think most people involved in this presentation are familiar with the Cascadia subduction zone, but in case you're not, it is the place where the Pacific Plate runs underneath the North American plate, or subducts underneath it. And what's unusual a little bit about the subduction zone is that unlike other fault zones around the world, in the US, the Cascadia subduction zone is very dormant for long periods of time and builds up much stress. And then on a period of 300 to 500 years, every 300 to 500 years, we experience a major earthquake here in the Northwest. So seismic resiliency has really come front and center over the past, I'd say, 25 years or so in this area. So that was really the big push for this project at Supreme Court. A little bit of history. The Supreme Court building is the building in the lower right, and obviously right a block over from the Oregon Capitol. But it is the oldest building on the Capitol Mall. And with the increased awareness of an impending Cascadia earthquake, the justices really rallied to upgrade and preserve what is really a symbolic building within our state. Okay, so it was designed by William Christmas Knighton in the Beaux-Arts style, and the building was constructed in 1914. At the time, it had the distinction of being the first terracotta building in Oregon that was not in Portland. And prior to its construction in 1914, the Supreme Court, the State Library, and the State Law Library were all located in the Capitol building. And when this building was completed, all of those functions relocated into this building, which was fortunate because some 20 years later in 1935, the former Capitol burned to the ground and was replaced with the Deco era Capitol that we have now. So very, very fortunate that the State Library and State Law Library had relocated out of that building. We do, our firm does quite a bit of work with the General Services Administration, and we've sort of adopted their preservation zones, for those of you who are familiar with them, into our historic projects more broadly. So prior to starting design work on the project, we applied the zones, the 3 different zones, to every space within the building. So zone 1 is depicted by the dark orange color, and that is the highest level of historic integrity or historic importance. And so we dubbed that a restoration zone. Zone 2, shown in the yellow color, is a rehabilitation zone. So it may be secondary historic spaces or historic spaces that have been modified a little bit more over time. And then everything in gray is what we call a renovation zone. So those are not relevant historic spaces or support spaces, or really areas of the building that have been totally transformed and don't really retain any of their historic character. So as we start to plan historic projects, we really want to understand, what's what relative to the building. So this is the first floor of the building, and the main north and south entrances and the corridor that connects the two is really the primary historic importance on the first floor. The restrooms actually have retained all of their original marble finishes and configurations generally, and so those are a secondary a zone 2 space. But then really the rest of the first floor had been largely reconfigured over time, so we had a lot more flexibility with that area. Moving up to the second floor, most of the second floor is the law library. It's a wide open space with stacked mezzanines on the east and west sides, and so the vast majority of that floor is a zone 1 with some of the adjacent spaces carrying the zone 2 classification. And then moving up to the third floor, this is the courtroom, the Supreme Courtroom floor. So the courtroom in the middle of the plan, as well as the stairs leading up to the third floor, are a primary zone, and also the justice chambers at the corners of the building are as well. The remainder of the spaces on the floor do retain some of their historic integrity, but had been modified a bit more over time. So those took on a zone 2 designation. So really a lot of the work, a lot of heavy work was done on this project prior to really getting into the design work. We had to, not only the preservation zones, we had to really understand the structure of the building and how it was going to react to seismic forces. So the primary structural concerns of the building, the floors are constructed of flat arch tile, which is unusually good in resisting gravity loads, but is really not very good in resisting seismic or loads or movement. So that was one thing that needed to be addressed. The second is that many of the partitions in the building are hollow clay tile, which are again very brittle and subject to crumbling in lateral loads. And then the perimeter walls of the building are non-load bearing URM. So we had to deal with those as well. One thing to note, the terracotta skin of the building actually had been anchored to the substrate in a different project about 20 years ago. So that was one thing we didn't have to worry about, was the attachment of the decorative terracotta to the masonry backup walls. We did a lot of scoping and feasibility study work at the outset. I mean, as we likely all know, no two buildings or locations are the same. And so we examined a lot of different alternatives prior to really getting into the design phase of the project. Mainly from a seismic standpoint, in this project, we were looking at a traditional fixed base retrofit and a base isolation solution. So as far as performance levels, many of you are probably familiar with this. They range all the way from just simple collapse prevention on one end of the spectrum to building being fully operational even after an earthquake event. So what code required for this project was a life safety upgrade. The Justice Department had aspirations to actually make it an immediate occupancy building. So there were a lot of voluntary additional upgrades that were done, and in the end, the building achieved something close to immediate occupancy. The only thing that prevented us from being at that level was like sort of a complete addressing of the perimeter URM walls. A lot of testing was done as well in advance of diving into the design. We did brick pull tests. We cored the floor in certain areas to determine the makeup and thickness of the decks. Steel columns were exposed at various places throughout the building to confirm that the structure was built as the construction drawings indicated, in terms of even down to just sort of like the number and the spacing of the rivets, which all really matter when you're trying to assess the existing structural integrity of the building. And then less structural but more architectural is, we discovered that the original cork floors still existed throughout much of the building. And then as we started into the structural design, our structural engineer partner, Pharrell Elsesser, did some virtual simulations. And so I'm going to play those for you really quickly. But the one on the left is a traditional fixed base, shows what the reaction of the building would be with a fixed base. And you can see as the ground starts to move, there's a tremendous amount of force that's put into the building. And so a traditional shear wall type retrofit would have required some fairly massive structural elements in order to resist those forces. And then on the right shows what a base isolated building how it would react during a major seismic event. And you can see as the forces start to hit the building drifts on its isolators, but much less of that force is transmitted up into the structure. So, and these forces were charted. So on the y-axis of this graph, the two lines, or sorry, the right axis is the floor levels of the building, and on the x-axis is the amount of acceleration experienced at each floor level. So the dashed blue and red lines represent the accelerations of a base isolated building. The dashed one being forces at an existing building level of the code, and the solid line being the forces at a new building level of the code. By contrast, the dashed purple and the green lines represent the forces in the building, as we kind of just saw in those simulations for a fixed base solution. So base isolation actually represented a pretty dramatic decrease in the forces in the building. On the right is just a diagram of the base isolators and what they kind of look like in section. And sort of how they operate in the event of a seismic event.
Did they indicate how much movement there really was going on there? Like how much does that building end up drifting?
Yeah, the design drift for the building is up to 24 inches. So that was the design movement that was calculated at the beginning.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So base isolation ultimately is what was selected for the project, and the cost differential was actually very modest, because even though there's a tremendous amount more structural work that happens at the foundation and the basement level, the amount of structural interventions in the superstructure in terms of shear walls, drag struts, and all those other components, not to mention the sort of demolition and reconstruction of all of the historic finishes that would have to accompany that upgrade. The base isolation takes enough of the force out that the interventions that happen to the superstructure are diminished enough that it actually brought the cost almost into balance. So this slide shows just essentially what the demolition plan for the basement level. The basement slabs came out. Essentially, the basement had to be gutted, and then the plan on the right shows the current plan with the base isolators, which are the large squares at each column line. Some shots of during construction showing the temporary shoring supports that were holding up the building as the foundation was being demolished underneath it. One of the things that made base isolation feasible in this project was the fact that the basement level was all a zone 3. Essentially, it had no. We kind of sort of had our. Going to kind of have our way with the basement without really impacting the historic fabric of the building. So you can see on the lower left, that's essentially what the basement looked like. And then on the lower right are the base isolators in place at the end of construction. These diagrams just attempt to sort of show what's happening at the typical perimeter wall. If I can gesture, can you see my cursor? Yep, okay. This big perimeter beam, which we call a ring beam, runs all the way around the perimeter of the building, and it is what bears on the perimeter base isolators. So everything from the ring beam up is what moves in the event, or is connected to the building, and everything From the base isolator down is what's connected to the ground. So there's a concrete basement wall that just about closes the gap, and then there's a moat that's around the building, and then an outer moat wall, which really is functions as a retaining wall. So at the entrance, the front porch is actually attached to the building and cantilevers out over the moat and over the ground. So when in the event of an earthquake, the ground moves, the building and the porch slab move together over the top of the ground. And here you can see what that looked like in construction. So the gap, which actually has just a temporary covering over it in this photo, that is the 24-inch gap. So the building can move up to 24 inches without, interfering with any of the fixed foundation. Over the top of that is a sidewalk pan, which is hinged on the building side. And as the building moves, it actually rides up over a sort of a canted curb at the outer edge of it. And then on the middle picture, you can see how the porch is attached back to the building and is not sitting on the base underneath it. And then this is what the sidewalk, the moat, essentially looks like after construction is complete. So even though we did base isolate the building, some shear walls and other elements in the superstructure were necessary, but we were able to do fairly lightweight, relatively speaking. So here's one of the corner justice chambers. Sort of during construction, the shear walls were added to the right side of this photo and then to the far left side of the photo. Here the shear wall is in place and plaster work going back into the space. And then here's the final product in the end. So the shear walls do have an impact on the interior. They're a thickened wall essentially, but by replacing the finishes, that visual impact is really kept to a minimum. Likewise, with the hollow clay tile walls that were everywhere, they required strong backs to brace them for out of plane forces. And so you can see in the left photo, there's a frame wall that's supporting that partition. Obviously, this wall gets a little thicker, but all of the plaster profiles were replaced in a slightly different plane. But in effect, again, very little visual impact to the final product. On the MEP side, essentially mostly all new systems. On the mechanical, all the fan coil units were replaced. We implemented chill beams within the office space, which is the middle picture. On the electrical side, all new electrical system, and the historic light fixtures were removed, rewired, actually UL listed, and retrofit with LED before being reinstalled. Backup generator was added for additional resiliency. It's located just adjacent to the building and partially depressed into the ground so that the generator enclosure, the top of the enclosure, actually aligned with the water table course at the base of the building. So the window sills effectively coursed out with the top of the enclosure. And then on the plumbing side, copper replaced the existing galvanized pipe system. Fixtures were low flow, and an all new sprinkler system throughout. So as far as some of the finishes, plaster was obviously a huge component of this project. There were many unique pieces of plaster. These were removed where needed to be removed. Urethane molds were created so that we could duplicate the elements like the brackets that are shown here, and then reinstalled once the structural modifications were complete. As far as wood, in the upper left, you can see the variety of wood that occurred in the building. So simply saying, new wood to match existing was not an adequate note on the drawings. There were different staining campaigns. There were areas where the wood had been exposed to more UV light and had faded considerably. So the craft workers really had to be very specific about locations and kind of staining wood to match. And it was a bit of an ordeal to get the wood right, but I think the photo on the far right kind of shows the final product, and I think turned out really well. Similar with the marble, there were the restrooms, as I mentioned earlier, retained a lot of the original marble, but there was a lot of staining to it. We tried doing some poulticing, and in the end, really just had to match, be sort of granular about tile that was used to patch in certain places. We also salvaged where we could, where marble was going away, salvaged those pieces and reinstalled them in other locations. And then finally, on the paint, we did a chromochronology of the paint throughout the building, which is microscopic analysis, which is shown in the top center photo, to determine what some of the historical colors were. And we really just designed a new paint scheme to emphasize decorative profiles, and mock-ups were huge. There were many mock-ups done, and they were very crucial to kind of getting the getting the paint scheme right in the end. So as far as some lessons learned, as I just mentioned, mock-ups. They're critical for a historic project like this. Also protecting features to remain and protecting elements that are salvaged for reuse. This is a broken light fixture shade, which is a little bit of an unfortunate casualty of the process. And then just tagging and storing the salvage material appropriately before while it's waiting for reuse. So this is what we at Hennebery Eddy call a net positive diagram, and it really just tries to capture not only some of the typical sustainability features of a building, such as energy savings and water reduction and things of that sort, but also just sort of the global positive impact of the building on its occupants. Laura really hammered on daylighting with the co-op, things of that sort. Really kind of just add to the overall a net positive story to the building. So you can see on the left some of the key stats for the project. It was LEED Gold certified, and some of the notable items there were pilot credits for resilience, innovation in resiliency, daylighting, where we reintroduced a lot more open space to the building, especially on the ground floor office areas. And then we reused over 50% of the non-structural items on the inside of the building. So the result of all that is that the Supreme Court is only the second LEED Gold certified base isolated historic building in the country. And just some of the final photography after the renovation was complete and the landscaping went in. This is the second floor law library. You can see the custom steel mezzanine in the background, and a subtle Greek key pattern in the new carpeting, which picked up on some of the railing details in the space. And then the sort of the after shot of the courtroom itself. At the top is a really fantastic lay light, and in case you're not familiar, a lay light sits in the ceiling, and it has a skylight above it at the roof level and the attic space in between. So that light isn't actually exposed to the exterior, but as a result of it being basically exposed to the attic, it had a tremendous amount of dirt and grime on it. And I've joked that we should have, just based on cleaning that grime off the top of it and the amount of additional light that came into the courtroom, should have earned us a LEED point in and of itself. And then we had also the kind of the added pleasure of being able to design a custom rug for the courtroom space. And you can see in the little insets on the left, there's a detail within the lay light, and then a corresponding detail in the custom rug of the courtroom below. And that's it for my presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, I have a question. In the photograph that you showed of the base isolators, I'm curious about those because it looks like there's like a sort of a rubber grommet that surrounds the part that moves, and I'm wondering, does that require maintenance, or does that require like I'm guessing it's not like an oil pan that's, you know. I'm just kind of curious about its functionality. Yeah, it looks like a CV boot for a vehicle, and those things have a tendency to wear out after time. And I'm just curious if that is similar to what's going on here.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm gonna see if Randall Reeks, who's on in the audience, who also was heavily involved in the project, knows the answer to that. It's a triple pendulum isolator, and I don't know that, you know, given that that housing, you know, isn't exercised, you know, in theory it never really moves. I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of maintenance that would be required. But Randall, if you know anything more, please chime in.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, unless there's a seismic event, there should be no issue with it. If there is a seismic event, then yeah, the protocol is to come out and have every isolator looked at, inspected. And so, but for the most part, it should, like Andrew said, if there's no movement, it should just be like it is and not have any issues with it.
Okay, cool. I was just curious as to whether or not it required any sort of maintenance, but it sounds like it doesn't. Once you got it in place, it just kind of waits for the earthquake.
Yep. Thanks, Randall.
There's a question in the chat. David's asking, did the base isolator perimeter seismic joint need to be concrete finish or sidewalk, or could it have been a planted area or something like that?
Yeah, it could have been. We looked at multiple options. One was to put, like a bark mulch or some type of planting in there, but then we felt that the draining of that could be an issue. So in the end, the decision was to fill it with concrete, which was more of a colored concrete. We went through mock-ups to pick a colored concrete that would go well with the building perimeter. As you can see here in this photo on the left, before the concrete was poured in, once that concrete was poured in, we power washed all that granite around the whole perimeter of the building and cleaned it real up. But to answer you, yes, it is concrete in there. It could have been other materials. It could have been a laid-in stone. It could have been tile. As long as it stayed within that moat pan itself, then it would be fine. Each moat pan had a joint, a 1/2-inch joint between them. I think each pan was probably about 6 feet long. And so then between that was a joint for each one too. So, but in this case, we decided as a team to go with a colored concrete infill.
We have another question in the chat. Would you please discuss the process to UL list the existing light fixtures?
Yeah, so with that, we did some research and we found a company back on the East Coast. I think they were out of Connecticut. Don't recall their name off the top of my head right now, but that was the company that we worked with to, one, get them UL listed and also provide us any new molds that we needed for any of those shades that we saw that picture of the shade that was broken. We were able to send that broken shade off to them, and they were able to make a custom shade based on that pattern and based on the actual fixture, roughly what size it was for the ring to fit back up into the fixture. But everything was shipped off to the company in Connecticut. They went through the process of categorizing each light. They sent us photos through the whole time, each process, and gave us an update throughout the process of where they're at and delivered them back to us.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions or any questions about the Bozeman Co-op? Okay, well, thank you so much for this. This was wonderful. And thank you everyone for showing up.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Yes,
Yep,
thank you.
welcome.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And congratulations on your AIA awards last year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.